beautiful slide. Thank you. So the beautiful slides of someplace verdant, clearly behind forest, stuff like that. And the lesbian boss says, "Oh my gosh, where is this?" And Anne says, "Oh, this is the Mayor Center in Myrtle Beach." And she starts showing pictures of the Mayor Center and these people that I later came to know, just other Baba lovers, and they're just smiling and grinning at the camera, and everybody's getting all happy now. And the boss says, "What do these people do for a living?" And Anne goes, "Well, this guy's a postman, that guy works in a restaurant, this and that." "No," she says, "that can't be. They're all so happy. They must have wonderful jobs. What do they do for a living?" So I just remember that. And then after that, I went and had, I was saying goodbye with the boss to the employees I had said hello to earlier. And I went with Anne, I said, "Geez, I didn't know you had this thing with Mayor Baba. Is there a center or something, a group in Atlanta?" She says, "Oh my gosh, the Baba reading room is reopening in 3 days after being closed for like 3 years. And we got this new place down to Little Five Points, and we're going to have our initial meeting there in a couple of days." So I came home thrilled. I had a new job. I had a Baba Center. I found the Baba Center. I was so excited. I told Barbara all this stuff. So we went to the Baba Center. Barbara baked a lot of cookies, and I will let Barbara pick up the story.
We were so excited that we went down earlier in the day just to be sure the place was real and to get a look at it. And people were still putting the finishing touches on it. So there were a lot of people you all would know just over the years. You would know them. It was very just kind of an array of Baba lovers from that time who were in the Atlanta area. And it was so lovely to be there that we rushed home and I started to bake. Just like different things, like 3 different things. We're going to feed these people. We're just going to bring them such good stuff to eat. So we came back at night, Jay and our little daughter Annika and me. And the room was really lively. There were quite a few people there. It was a very happy occasion. Charles Haynes was leaving Atlanta. He had finished his time at Emory and he was going on. And it was the inauguration of this meeting room. So Jay is going around, just hobnobbing and schmoozing and meeting people. And he came up beside me and like tapped me on the elbow and said, "Oh, look over there, that's Meher Baba's sadra. A sadra is a blouse. And look, they put it into a kind of an acrylic box and it's on a chair over there." And I said, "I want to see that." So I walked across the room to look at it. And I was extremely touched and moved that they had basically sat it in the chair as though it was Baba. It was just like, it had a beautiful location in the room where it could see everybody. They had treated it like it was, just a representation of Baba. And as I stood looking at it, I was suddenly just overwhelmed with the knowledge, just the absolute certainty that the person who had worn that shirt was God, that was God's shirt. And that was nothing that I'd been thinking before, but at that moment, it was so absolutely crystal clear that I would say it was like being struck by lightning. I just was stunned that one of the things that had happened over the years was I had always loved Baba since I first heard his name, but Jay was very devoted to, in his own spiritual path. So every once in a while, I would think, if only we could like join up and do the same thing, it would be just so much nicer. So occasionally I would say to Jay, "Do you think Meher Baba could be God? Do you think he could be who he said he was?" And Jay would always have a reason why not. And one of the reasons was that Baba had had car accidents and his suffering had shown. And as soon as I heard that, I got this like pressure on my heart. And all I could think was, oh, that's God. That's the way God would do it. God comes and nobody else suffers that way for everyone else. I know that's God. And another time I said to him, do you think he could have been God? And they said no, because he always promised he would break the silence, and he died and he hadn't broken the silence. And I thought, oh, he really is God, because God is mysterious. And if it had been the right time to break his silence, he would have broken it. But he doesn't do things because we expect that he does what has to be done. He's God. And then another time, the third thing was I asked Jay again, I asked him something about Baba, and he said, oh, Baba's favorite song was Begin and Begin. And I thought, yes, if God came into the world in the 20th century in human form, Cole Porter would be his favorite musician. That must be God. But seeing his shirt, it just brought my mind to an absolute stop. I was staring at it. It was the only thing I could see. The whole room disappeared, and all I could think was, I didn't know. I didn't know. I knew, and I didn't know. Really him. And as I stood there looking at it, everything began gradually to disappear. I could feel just kind of the nothingness of a lot of things, but it wasn't frightening. And the last thought that crossed my mind was just like one of those airplanes with the banner that flies along the beach at the center. And the message was, this is kindness. And I realized that Baba had come into the world as a person out of pure kindness, and that it was so gigantic, it was so beyond that word, that every atom in the universe is just dancing with joy at his existence, that he came into the world like that. And as I began to sort of regain some kind of practical consciousness, I stood again looking at the shirt, and I could see that it was torn at the back and had little tiny stitches that somebody had really lovingly done. And when I saw those stitches, I could hardly contain myself. I was just so charmed by them, by somebody having done something so delicate and sweet for the person who had worn that shirt, that the only thought that I had at that moment was, oh, I just wish I had seen him wear it. And if I had, it would have fit over his shoulders like this, and the placket on the front would have fit down his chest like that, and it would have moved like this when he breathed. And I thought, that's not my imagination. I don't have that good an imagination. That shirt is moving, it's somebody's breathing. And when I saw that, it was Baba. Baba was sitting in the chair and breathing and wearing that shirt, and so beside himself with happiness that he was just making signals and wriggling in his chair. I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased with the way you love me. And I never heard anything that made me happier than that. But on the other hand, as soon as it sank in that I had made him happy by loving him, and that was all I had ever really wanted, I also remembered that I hadn't. I mean, I just hadn't paid attention. I hadn't done it well. I had just been distracted and had other things on my mind, and he deserved to be loved. And it hurt to see the difference between what I had done and what he actually deserved. But when he saw me sort of torn that way, he just went like this, and he just brought it all together and he said, but that doesn't matter anymore, because you do love me. And when he said that, I said, well, now that I see what makes you happy, I do know how to love you, and I will. And I went,
Oh, don't freeze now.
back to the back of the room, because people had begun to leave. And as I sat there, I thought, this is what I've always wanted. I've always heard the sound of the river, of the story of God's involvement in the world, of God's love for us all. It's just been in the distance, and I've always been running along the banks of that river, so thirsty. And that night, it just overflowed its banks. So I knew absolutely who Baba was. When we went out to the car, Jay said, so did you see the Sadra? I said, yes, I did. And I didn't know what to say about the rest of it.
She didn't tell me this story for 5 years.
7. It was 7. It was 7. I didn't know you could tell the story. So it wasn't until one night we were sitting together with John and Carol Gunn, and they were just talking about various things. And I thought, oh, that was a story. I could tell it as a story. And that's actually when I found the words for it. So within, I think, 2 weeks, we were at the center for the first time. And in those days, you could just come and stay for a long time. I think we stayed for like 2 or 3 weeks, just that first visit. I mean, just diving in. And I had still weeks and weeks of insomnia where literally I couldn't even sleep for an hour a night. I was just a zombie. And I was still so filled with anxiety. And I thought, oh God, we're going to go to the center and people are going to realize I'm a total neurotic and I'll probably end up in the hospital or something. It's going to be horrible. But if the center is what I feel it is, I'll be all right. And if it isn't, I'll just find a way to live out the rest of my life somehow or other. And we got to the center and it was just like meeting Baba. It was just so healing as soon as we stepped through the gateway. And it was the end of that whole time of anxiety and insomnia. I was fine from then on. Not for the rest of my life, but at that, for that episode, for the time that through difficulty brought us to Baba that way. He had achieved his effect, and he sort of calmed things down after that.
So I'm going to tell about meeting Charlie Gardner at that same meeting while Barbara was kneeling down in front of the chair. I was hanging around the kids area, keeping an eye on Annika and my daughter, who was 2 or so at the time, maybe 3. And Charlie Gardner was sitting nearby, keeping an eye on his kids. And I struck up a conversation with a guy I'd never met before, Charlie Gardner, and we start chatting. And he says, how did you hear about Bob? And I said, I would know, do you know a guy named Jerry Hodgen? And Charlie says, yeah, a little. We bought a farm together and we've been farming together on this farm for the past 3 years. And then we had a fight and we just broke up. And now he's going his way and I'm going my way. And I said, oh, really? I'd love to talk to him. Charlie spent a good half hour not telling me how to contact Jerry Hodgen. He wouldn't tell me his phone number. He wouldn't tell me where he's living, anything. Just because he's being Charlie fucking Gardner, just trying to make trouble. And so eventually he comes around and he says, okay, here's how you contact Jerry Hodgen. And I got back after jumping in the car with Barbara, who told me she had a nice time seeing the shirt. Got back home and I called Jerry Hodgen long distance. So I'm in Atlanta. It's going to be hard to keep all this straight. So I just want to clarify, I'm in Atlanta on the telephone. Jerry is in Clemson, South Carolina, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from where we're living. And he's on the telephone. And I call Jerry and I say, hi, Jerry, this is Jay Schauer. And Jerry just about falls over. He says, oh my God, Jay, I just got back from India. I got back from a pilgrimage to the Samadhi of Meherabad Baba, and you were there. And he tells me that while he was at the Samadhi, one of his last days there, some guy walked in and he looked and talked and acted exactly like me. And Jerry jumped up and gave him a big hug And the guy looks at him like, what? And eventually Jerry realizes that it's not me. And he says, oh my gosh, you look just like this friend of mine who's a follower of Swami Muktananda. And the guy looks and says, that's odd, because I'm a follower of Swami Muktananda, and Swami Muktananda sent me here. Jerry follows through with talking to this guy who looks like me. And the guy says, when I arrived in Ganesh Puri to see Swami Muktananda, the first thing he told me was to visit the tomb of the Avatar. And after a while, I thought it might be a nice idea to actually do that. So I'm supposed to leave India in like 2 days. So I asked one of the Muktananda's disciples who the Avatar was. And they told me, when Muktananda talks about the Avatar, he is speaking of Meher Baba. And here's how you get to Ahmednagar to the tomb. So this guy, what was his name, darling? Do you remember? Robert? Robert. So Robert finally figures out how to get on a bus from Ganesh Puri to Pune to Ahmednagar, and shows up half asleep at the Samadhi where Jerry is sitting. It's a Meherazad day, and he just didn't feel like making the trip. So he was sitting at the tomb all day while everybody else has gone to Meherazad. And he hears the story, and he tells Robert, go in there, kneel down, pay your respects to Meher Baba, and then I'm going to take you to Meherazad. So they hop in a rickshaw and they go to Meherazad. Now, while they're in Meherazad, everybody's in Meherazad sitting around Mandali Hall, and Jerry brings in Robert, who explains the Muktananda connection and being there and everything. And Erich is very interested and wants to hear about it. And after he's heard about it a little bit, Robert basically is no longer today's news. He just sits there while Erich is talking. And Erich is talking, and people say, what about this, Erich? And what about that? And Erich is talking and talking and talking. And Robert, Erich notices, is getting more and more and more antsy. And Muktananda's ashrams, Muktananda's whole thing was, you do stuff when you're told, the second you're told. He had little timers with binging clocks on them. Bing! Okay, meditation for 10 minutes. Click, 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 click. Bing! Meditation's over. Now you stand up for 5 minutes. Bing! Now you sit down and eat. 15 minutes. Bing! Everything was totally laid out, just listening for the bing. And Robert looks at Erich and says, what do you do here? And Erich says, we don't do anything. We just love Baba. And Robert is like freaked and disappointed that nothing's going to happen. There's no bell. So Erich looks at the clock and says, at 2 o'clock, we will take a walk up Seclusion Hill together. And now Robert's fine. Just like, yep, okay. Yeah, I'm fine. Any minute now, it'll be 2 o'clock. Yep, okay, ready to go. Almost 2. And at 2 o'clock, Erich stands up, and everybody goes, and they start to go on the walk up Seclusion Hill. And I should note that having read these Baba books and talked to Jerry from time to time, I was familiar with Mandali Hall. I was familiar with Erich and what Erich was like. I was familiar with Seclusion Hill. I knew all these things by name. And so what he was telling me was something I was familiar with, although I'd never been there and never seen it. And as they're walking up Seclusion Hill, you know, all the local Western disciples are saying, oh, Erich, what do you think about, I don't know, people, what, living together, not being married? And Erich would say, oh, Baba says, da, da, da. I don't know what Baba said, but Erich then repeated what Baba said related to the question. And then he looked over to Robert and said, Robert, what does Muktananda say about that? And Robert looks at him, well, my Baba says this, that, and the other thing about not being married and living together. There's nods. pretty much the same thing, he says. They go up the hill a little bit more. They're going up the hill a little bit more. And somebody says, what does Baba say about what happens if you commit suicide? And Eric says, well, Baba says this, that, and the other. And he turns to Robert and says, what about your Baba? And Robert says, oh, my Baba says this, that, and the other thing. And this continues on. What does Baba say about thus and so? And Eric says, well, Baba said this, that, and the other. He looks over at Robert. Robert says, well, my Baba says that this other thing. Continues on, question after question. Baba says, my Baba says, finally, somebody asks a question. And Eric doesn't answer. He just turns to Robert. And Robert says, well, my Baba says, da, 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 da. And Eric just nods. Yep. Like they're the same. Like they're totally the same. And remember, this is Jerry telling me the story on the phone, and I'm sitting in my house in Atlanta. And I had been so upset and confused because all this Mayor Baba stuff was happening. I'd met Ann Giles. I'd found the Baba community. I'd been reading books that Muktananda wrote, and everything at this time, I would open up a book in any place randomly. And every time I did it for like a week, it was something about Mayor Baba, Muktananda talking about Mayor Baba. And I don't want Mayor Baba. Instead of that, I want to just love you, Muktananda. I want to love you as purely as I possibly can. After years of trying to get lights and colors and powers, which is what Muktananda gave most of his disciples, I had given up, and all I wanted to do was love him. And now here, I'm hearing this story that Muktananda and Baba are basically the same. That had been set up in a way so that both Muktananda and Baba are telling me we are one and the same. We are the same. I'm going to go a step beyond this. A couple weeks later, I was at the Southeast Gathering. Barbara and I and Annika went to this second Southeast Gathering ever. And I was listening to Kathy Haas Riley and Rick Flynn sing There's a Heartache Following Me a cappella. And I listened, and I'd never heard the song before. And I heard those words, and I just began to weep. I just began to weep. And I remembered the story in Listen Humanity, where some fella is listening to Baba and tries to say something. He says, I want to say a prayer. And I thought, I want to say a prayer. I want to say the prayer that Muktananda gave me because I'm not feeling right about Muktananda and Baba. So we were all sitting, it was a morning arti, and I began to sing this Muktananda song, and I began to weep, just like the man in the story in Listen Humanity, the one that Baba had said, you don't need to weep, I am God. And I heard Baba say that to me. Mayor Baba said that to me. And I had this image that I was on a trapeze, and I could feel Muktananda holding onto my hands. And suddenly he let go. And I'm in midair, and suddenly, whap, again, Mayor Baba's hands. And my last thought about that was out of the frying pan into the pot, into the fire. And I've been with Mayor Baba ever since.
Beautiful.
Oh, and I told you, Jeff, that Barbara would tell her story about the joke.
Yeah. Am I audible here? Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
I'm hearing you.
Yeah, good.
You want to tell the joke, Barbara?
So, about a year later, we I said to Jay, we've been to the center a number of times and I'd run into, the other Baba lovers. And I said to Jay, I want to be like them. Whatever dye vat they've been dipped in, they've got Baba like in every little crevice of their being, and I want that too. And Jay said, I think you have to go to India, have that happen. So let's send you to India. So we saved for a bit and arranged a trip for August and September of 1980. As I was packing for the trip, I suddenly realized that our names, Jay's name and mine, are a joke. That my name is Barbara, but my family calls me Baba, and Jay's name is actually John, and his family calls him Jay. And I thought, oh, geez, we are Jay Baba. That's a joke. And and I heard this little inner voice say, yes, but it's not for you. It's for Mera. You have to go and bring it to Mera. So I was going to India anyway. And honestly, I was such a kind of a novice about things that I knew there were a lot of women in India whose names began with M. And I had no idea how to differentiate them. But when I got there, I started to sort of keep an eye out for actual Mera. And I met her pretty soon after I arrived. But one day she had a tea. And I thought, and she invited me to it. She invited a number of people to it. And I, was one of them. So I walked into the dining room and tried to figure out where to sit because I knew the joke was from Baba to Mera. And that I just had to tell it to her somehow. I had to get close enough to tell her. So I looked at the table and I thought, well, she probably sits at the head of the table and probably someone she knows well sits over there. So I'll sit one seat down from that. And then when we all sat down, I was sitting right beside Mera because the head of the table was for Baba. Oh, it's for Baba. So Mera was just sitting right by my side. And there was a lot of tea time conversation. And then finally I turned to Mera and said, Mera, I've come with a joke for you. And she said, yes. They told her the joke of our names. And there was this kind of little rustle around the table as people went, ooh, ooh, you got named Baba? You got named Baba? And I thought, oh my gosh, I've never even thought that anybody would make anything of that, except that as part of this little story joke. And I suddenly thought, yeah, my name is Bob. So embarrassing that my ego would show up that way at that moment. I felt like it was this big rock that I had to keep at the top of the hill, and I lost. I mean, it just came rolling down right over me and made a mess. And Mera had to kind of like fix everything up and make sure everybody felt okay. So I felt terrible, and for several days I just felt like I'm a bad pilgrim. I'm not good at this at all. I should just go home. And Dr. Gohair was bicycling along and she spun around on her bicycle, and I thought nobody liked the joke and it was just awful. And she said, Barbara, your joke, we've been telling it to each other over and over again at the house, and every time somebody says Jay Baba to us, we just start to laugh. I guess it went over okay. I was the last to know. But anyway, yeah, our names are a joke. We are Jay Baba.
Beautiful.
So we could probably go on telling wonderful stories about how wonderful we are all night. Does anybody have any specific thing they want to ask or make a comment about or point out that we are egotistical, nasty people?
Jay, I remember when you guys first came to the center, and it was a program, probably a Friday night program, and we were doing some music after the program itself. And I remembered, like, You got it up. I mean, you were right there from the seat. You also sang a song. And like this is your first time at the center and you felt comfortable enough just to be one of the people singing. I just thought I always take that as a good sign that that people feel comfortable enough. They don't just sit shyly the whole time. You kind of got it.
Do you remember the song that I sang, Jeff?
I think no, I think it was a Christian, I mean, a hymn or
No,
something.
it was Little GTO. Little GTO, you're really looking fine.
Oh, really?
Yes. 3 deuces and a 4 speed and a 389. Because I really felt like Baba was the GTO of the spiritual masters. And that's really true.
Hey, oh, good. We got Tony here. Yeah.
Hi, I just wanted to say I'm really enjoying this a lot. Jay, we haven't met, but I'm pleased to meet you here.
Yeah,
and I'm
we
enjoying this.
exchanged a lot of emails and stuff.
Uh-huh. And especially I want to say hi to Barbara, who is
Hey,
so
Jen.
supportive of Baba in me on Facebook.
Yeah.
And it's a pleasure to see the person who I know so well.
We are kind of friends. We're just kind
Yeah.
of like comments friends and like friends. And yeah, I love your music. I love your house. It's so expressive. It's just wonderful.
Well, it's a delight to meet the two of you. I'm really, really happy. When I heard it was going to be you two, I was like, oh God, I can't wait. Anyway, so thanks. Oh, and I'll say you remind me in person, you have a certain, I don't know, it's a dignity. You remind me a little bit of Jane Haynes in that respect.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank
there's
you.
that.
Funny you should mention that.
What?
Oh, we have such history with Jane Haynes.
Please share.
Oh no, honest to God. That's 3 hours and it needs to go in a burn bag.
Thank you
Well,
for
that's
being
good
here,
job.
Tony.
Nice to meet you, Tony.
Love to
Yeah.
see you and Elena.
Here's Josh from Australia.
Hello, can you hear me, everyone?
Yes.
Hey,
Okay, awesome. I was wondering what if I could individually ask a question and you both answer individually, but what personally touches your heart most about Baba? Would be lovely to hear from you folks.
Good question.
About Baba. What touches my heart about Baba? Barbara, do you have an answer?
wow, I'd never heard it just put that way. I mean, everything about him. I've been reading recently about Mary Magdalene. Some people that I know were very interested, and we're going to be talking about her. So, what Mary Magdalene did that's different from the other people around the God-man was she really saw him. She really knew who that was. She knew that that was God incarnate, that just wasn't just a hero figure, but that's actually the distillation of all the sweetness and goodness and compassion and love in the universe just coming down into the form of one person. And it's an unusual thing that somebody actually knows that and sees that. And I think Baba has been so generous and kind with sharing that that possible way of seeing him with all of us. I mean, that we've all been just kind of undone from our usual prosaic way of looking at things, and we can actually see things more with eyes that have been refreshed by the way that he looks at things. So I love that it's not theoretical, that we actually have a living sense that God has come into the world as a person, and we've been so fortunate to get to know that, but also to do something about it by loving him. And I will say, I had a dream before we went to India. It was about 10 or 12 years ago. It was early in the morning. I always set the radio to go off on the news for a kind of a wake up. And this particular morning, I knew that it was before the time when the radio would go off, but the news was already on. And I thought, what's that? And it was a dream that I was having of Eric.
Oh,
Oh,
we've
you're
lost.
breaking up.
And Erich was the news. Erich was sitting
Okay,
there
Peter,
and
say
obliquely,
it
like he
again.
often did when
Erich
people would
was
ask him
doing
questions, he
the
would talk.
news on.
Erich was doing the news on the radio, and I could hear him and I could see him, even though I wasn't in the same room with him. I could see him delivering the news. And his news was that Meher Baba, the avatar, is the advocate, or make up for them, or just somehow make things right in a very legal way. And Erich was saying everything that Baba ever did in his life, every breath he took, every action that he took, was to compose within himself the perfect contract between you and God. And that there was nothing missing. There was nothing that you might have known that you would have ignored or would have been held back from you, that absolutely everything was contained within it. And the way that you agreed to it was by loving him. And Erich said, and be sure that you remember that it's any possible way you can love him, that it's thinking of him, it's seeing a picture of him, it's embroidering his name on a pillowcase, it's laughing at something about him. Any way you can remember him and keep him present to yourself. You sign the contract, and everything that he included in it, which is like everything that a human being could possibly contain, is yours. And that's what he wants. That's what he wants for you. That's why he did that with his life. So I love that. I mean, I think there's been a lot of theorizing in all the different religions about God and what it is and where it is and who gets it, who doesn't. And Erich's pronouncement that morning was that everybody gets this. All you have to do is hear his name. And somebody actually interviewed Kitty at a certain point and said, you spent years of your life living with Baba, and he had an effect on you, and he shaped you, and you had all these stories and experiences. What is it that you came away with from all of that? What did you get? And she said, I got the same thing that everybody gets, that the only thing that you can have, it's his name. And she said, and everything is in his name, everything.
Beautiful.
Josh, I'm going to tell you a dream that I had that I think is what Baba's about to me. I was dreaming about, I used to go to a church summer camp. And in my dream, I was at this dorm that was familiar to me. And I saw a bunch of kids coming toward the dorm, and they were coming toward the dorm door, and the children were all blind. They were blind. And they're like feeling around. I can't find the doorknob. I don't know where the lock is. I couldn't get in the dorm. And suddenly Baba shows up, and he walks into the midst of the kids, and they're going, Baba, you got to help us. And Baba is closing his eyes and going, oh, I can't find the door. I can't find the lock. Well, how do we get in? Just like the kids are. And eventually Baba and the kids manage to find the door, and they're laughing and having a good time because he's making it fun. And they all go into this dorm. And I'm sitting going, what's that all about? And there's a narrative voice that shows up in my dreams very often. And the narrator says, oh, this is Baba's pleasure at this camp. He takes care. These are children with disabilities from all over, and he takes care of them all. And I begin to see scenes, and there's a scene of Baba sitting in his chair about to greet some kid who has got just paralyzed legs and is doing one of those things where they're just dragging their legs behind him in braces. while they're bravely walking with canes or crutches. You've probably seen people walking that way. And the kid is walking across the room to get to Baba. Baba stands up. He pulls out a couple of canes and he drags himself to the kid. The two of them dragging themselves together. And there's another little kid who has no arms, one of those like thalidomide babies that didn't have arms. And this kid comes in to see Baba and he makes the mandali bring ice cream. And the kid sits there and he's happy that he's going to get some ice cream. Somebody's going to give him a spoonful of ice cream. And Baba has also got his ice cream. And Baba just dives his face into the ice cream. Ice cream. And the kid goes, oh, I've always wanted to do this. And just dives in and starts sucking down the ice cream, putting his face in the ice cream. And there's another little kid who came in to see Baba, the voice says, and this kid refused to do anything that anybody asked him. He was just the most ornery kid. And his parents came in and said, Baba, you have to tell this kid to obey. And Baba said, I won't. I'm not going to do it. You can't make me.
Oh,
And I was so touched by these scenes. It was very touching. And I walked away from the room where these scenes were occurring, and I walked out into the campground, the trees, the paths, and I began to think that they looked more familiar than I would have remembered as from being a kid. And finally, I see that there's the lagoon cabin. There's the original kitchen. And there are all these people. And the kids are us. Okay, that's my Baba story.
wow. Beautiful. God. Great question, Josh. That's, oh, wow. Gotta sit with that. Let's ask Meher's got her hand up. Meher.
It was such a lovely talk, really lovely. After a long, long time to hear such a lovely this thing about Baba. I really loved it.
Thank you.
I'm going to try and get them on the Bombay's this thing, Bombay Center thing also. I'm just going to take Barbara's email and I'm going to give it to the person. You all have to join again. Really lovely. Really lovely.
Thank you.
And you know, and Eric said you should always share your story whenever you're asked. Didn't Eric say that?
Yes, and he said, tell the whole story.
Yeah.
So when people ask us to tell our story, we say, wait a minute, do you really want to hear a long, long story? Because that's what we're going to tell you. You got to be ready to sit for like an hour.
Yeah, no, this was beautiful, really. Wow. So I guess we're getting. Oh, we got Fred Jeremy. Go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
J Mayor Baba all. One thing I'd like to share is about 10 years ago, I read the book Avatar by Gene Adriel. And one of the great memories I have of reading that book was a story that Norina had told to, I believe it was some of the disciples or to some of the fellow. She was telling it in the book about how Baba once in the middle of conversation abruptly departed the conversation to put a paper bag like a garbage paper bag on top of his head, and he immediately vanished. And I thought that spoke volumes to the mystical side of Baba, because with mysticism, it's not just this or that. It's not just, it's outside the box, really. So you can come up with many different ways of appearing in God form through disappearing in one area and appearing in another area. And I know at the time, what Baba had mentioned at that time was that he was doing a universal duty to preserve and help and save one of the fellow Baba lovers from danger, if you will. So anyway, and I know there's one other memory I wanted to share from last week, but about how beloved Baba's blue car appeared in my driveway about 12 years ago in town Brunswick, Maine. And I could see beloved Baba's blue car floating into my driveway, just literally like floating. And then he took an examination of my vehicle. I don't have the whole time to tell the entire story, but it was after an illustrious event with my vehicle. So it was just a very interesting time for me, in which I felt like it was able to loosen the binds that confine us, to loosen the binds or the bindings or the chains that confine us to, it was just part of a long chapter, but I just thought I'd share that with you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, kind of slipping into the other dimension a little bit. Sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, so it's here on the East Coast. We're and Jay, you probably you weren't able to resurrect. Now when I even
Jeff, I'm going to take a big pass on it, but
okay.
I'm sorry to say
Yeah.
that just can't happen tonight.
Yeah, he sings this beautiful song of Balkalchuris, which we'll get sometime. But
I'll
let's
I'll dial into another one of these and sing it.
Yeah. So let's have a few moments of silence. Does anyone have, Barbara or Jay, do you have like a quote of Baba's that handy that you'd like to read before we have a little period of silence?
Barbara, can you remember the job quote?
Oh,
This was very touching. You did, it was so vivid.
Hang on a minute. I'm going to get the job quote.
yeah, this was actually Eric Tepperman. It was part of some Dooney gathering, and he had this quote. Somebody else asked, I think it was Kelly Lambach asked, where did that quote come from? Because he couldn't track it down, and I haven't been able to either. But Eric Tepperman is just so knowledgeable about Baba that I believe it must have a real source. Anyway, it was Baba saying to someone, your job is to remember me. My job is everything else.
Yeah, and I've heard that, but he kind of got in touch with me, and I've heard it.
Yeah.
I've read it maybe, but I don't know where it came from.
Jeff, I don't care if it's authentic. It's authentic.
Yeah. So Barbara, say that again, and then we'll have a period of silence.
This is Baba talking to one of his lovers, saying, your job is to remember me. My job is everything else.
Jay&Barbara. Wow. That was fantastic. Wow. And that's the first time I've actually heard I've heard bits and pieces of your story, but never just kind of from beginning all the way through. It's so lovely. And yeah, no last minute questions or anything or comments. Yeah.
Thank you for hosting this, Jeff. It's really just a wonderful, just, disembodied but genuine way for us all to get together and grow closer to Baba by doing it. I really love that you do this.
Yeah, yeah. And there are people here from India and and I think that someone made a mistake, and I don't think it was recorded right from the beginning, which is but if it is, but it goes on recordings, and then people from all over the world who don't have our same time zone can tune into it. But you spoke so beautifully and so vividly and brought me to tears a few times. And what we got, but fortunately we got your scene with the Sadra, Baba Sadra, and Jay's dream there. God, that is heartbreaking. Where Baba, he becomes blind with these blind kids. You know what I mean? He's disabled with the disabled kids. I mean, and that's in a way that's the way he is. It's incredible. Anyway, so thank you. All of you for coming out. Jay&Barbara, wow.
Jay
Baba.
Jay
Thank
Baba.
you, Jeff, for arranging it, and thank you, Jay&Barbara. It was very, very wonderful to hear your stories.
Yes,
Happy to
Thank
be
you for
with you.
sharing.
Jay Baba.
Jay&Barbara. This
That's
is
from Bombay
this is-
there.
Jai Baba.
Yeah.
Jai Baba.
this is Marion, New York City. You could have gone on for days and days. Thank you so much, and thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, you can have spoken for a long, long time. Really lovely.
Well, we'll get them back in again sometime.
Yes, Jeff, definitely
Yeah.
get them back in.
Yeah.
Quickly get them. Really nice.
Yeah.
Nice talk.
Beautiful.
Jay Baba.
Yeah.
Jay&Barbara, and thank
Jay&Barbara,
you.
thank you.
Jay&Barbara, thank you.
Baba.
Jay&Barbara.
Thank you, Baba.
Yeah. What time is it there, Josh and Sydney?
It's 1:30 p.m. down under in Sydney.
Oh, okay.
How come?
Yes.
That's not bad.
Mm.